All right, it's 10:30 or 1:30 EST if you're where I am. I'm coming in from Toronto, Ontario in Canada. So very, very excited to be part of this conference and seeing all the speakers from across the world, or at least across North America. So thank you everyone for having me and for coming to this session. This is very exciting. I'm not going to put any polls today, but I just out of curiosity, if you're willing to share where you're from, you can put it in the chat, like which city, which area, which country. Nice, thanks, Jillian. Finland, a lot of people from US and Finland. Whoa, very cool. Oh, India too. Nice. Awesome, very, very cool. Oh, thanks for sharing. This is a truly international conference. Very, very exciting. So thanks for coming in and taking the time to view this session. I'm feeling very flattered. Yes, Montreal, Mexico, nice, awesome, very cool. All right, well, thanks for sharing. I will begin my my session, but if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat. I'll try and look at the chat intermittently, and if there's any issues, of course, just put in the chat as well that you're experiencing some issues with my screen or whatever it may be. Awesome. So thank you again, everyone, for coming to the session. Very, very excited to have to present this for you. I'm Victoria Granova. I'm very excited to present something that I'm also very, very passionate about. The field of psychology, it's several hundred years old. So cybersecurity, on the other hand, is several decades old and evolving every day. So the one constant that we are dealing with out there in the world is humans, the human factor. People are everywhere. And because people haven't changed very much in the past 1,000 years, what will help us in the real world is understanding people. So we've been discussing the human factor in cybersecurity for a while, but rarely in scientific terms or in terms of psychology. And what I'm bringing to this session today is just some concepts from psychology that we can apply in our cybersecurity lives. So this is definitely very much a primer. It's a very short presentation. I only have 20 minutes of content or so, but if you have any questions, that's where the real value will come, I think, is from our back and forth and comments as well, because I know I'm definitely not an expert in this at all. I'm an enthusiast. I'm a student. I research some of these topics, and I would love to hear everyone else's experience and comments and questions and everything like that. So that's so let me know if you have any as we go through the session. I do, of course, have a mandatory disclaimer. I am here as myself, as a student, as an enthusiast, and I'm only bringing my knowledge, right? I'm only bringing my knowledge and my experience, both from my studies in psychology and as a cybersecurity professional, but that is purely my own views. I'm not representing any organizations, any employers, no one else. It's just me. So I need to say that. So I'll start with a little bit about myself. I am currently in my day job. I'm a senior information security consultant. I work primarily in major incident management. So it's a very, very exciting role. In not my day job, I have the pleasure of leading the IC² Toronto chapter. So if you're familiar with IC², it's the organization, it's a global organization based in the US that administers certifications like the CISSP, Certified Information System Security Professional, and and many other certifications as well. There's a cloud certification. So if you have any questions in that regard, just let me know. And of course, our Toronto chapter is completely open and free for anyone to join. It doesn't matter where you're based or anything like that. Especially now in this virtual world, our events are available for everyone. So we primarily deal with educational events, networking sessions, that kind of thing, based in the Greater Toronto area, but open to all, of course, because this is we're one world now, and it's all virtual. I'm also the founder of the Cyber Toronto Conference. Oh, I see someone from Toronto, Canada too. Hi. Awesome. So we have so Cyber Toronto Conference is an annual conference that started it last year. It's a virtual conference. It's free for everyone. It's available for everyone. So we hosted through Zoom. So that's the Cyber conference. I also have the pleasure of teaching part-time at York University in the certificate in cybersecurity. And I guess the only other thing that I will note is that, yes, I'm currently pursuing the certificate in psychology at Ryerson University in Toronto. But my background, I started out in business. I was a business student. I was also fascinated about the human element back then. In the business world, the human element, or the study thereof, is called organizational behavior, and I thought that it was the most interesting subject of all time. And now, when I went into cybersecurity, I was again also interested in social engineering. So manipulating the humans to get what you want as an attacker. So that's so my interest really remained the same from industry to industry, is studying the human factor. It's a very exciting thing for me. So, as we know, it's constant battle, right? Staying in front of technology and how fast technology changes, and protecting the systems. And as the technology infrastructure advances, is very difficult. And we know that attack vectors or attack techniques change all the time. But the one constant, thankfully, I mentioned before, is the human element, right? So even though there seem to be new attacks coming in all the time, the one constant that the attackers are leveraging is social engineering. So, and they're leveraging it as a vector to get into systems. It's one of the top vectors in attacks, which I'll talk about a little bit further. So I will be talking a lot about social engineering today, specifically through the eyes of psychology, using the concept of psychology as well. And that is because the principles of psychology will remain constant throughout the technology change, and understanding them will help better defend ourselves. So let's talk about social engineering. So social engineering, it's, to quote a book by Christopher Hadnagy, it's the art of human hacking. So leveraging human weaknesses to get what the attacker wants, be it personal information or access to a corporate system, etc. So according to the 2020 Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report, phishing remains the top threat action in breaches, and financially motivated social engineering continues to increase year over year. And in addition, if that wasn't bad enough, the social element is one of the top actions in the beginning and in the middle of incidents. So this demonstrates that it's a significant factor in getting in and staying in a system in an incident. So definitely a big problem in cybersecurity. It's largely, I would say, unresearched or under-researched rather at this moment, at least in the academic world. I know there's a lot of amazing, awesome work happening in research in private organizations, so companies and so forth. But definitely there's a lot of opportunities to dive deeper into this, especially in academia. This is where I'm very, very interested in. So as an industry, we definitely talk about the human factor a lot as the weakest link. So, for example, if we only could remove the user from the system, we'd be able to make the system so much more secure. So, unfortunately, the systems still rely on us as humans inputting things. And also, another thing that I want to mention is that when we're talking about the human factor, we're definitely talking about ourselves. We are those humans that we're talking about. So I want to dispel the negativity or the blame that comes with the human factor, and seek to understand it itself instead. So understanding it, or understanding ourselves, can help better prepare ourselves against social engineering. Hi, Anisha, I see a note. Hi, everyone. So if you have any questions, by the way, any comments, questions, just put them in the chat throughout. I'll keep monitoring the chat as I go through the slides. All right. So not to worry, for this section or for this presentation, we don't need a background or a degree in psychology at all. I'll definitely relay all the concepts back to cybersecurity. And if we look at psychology as in the definition, this is a scientific study of the mind, brain, and behavior. I'm focusing today on the behavior part of the definition. So why we do what we do. So what I'm not going to be focusing on today, though, is why do attackers attack? because potatoes are gonna potato. I'm just gonna focus on us as defenders. So why we do what we do when we try to defend our respective worlds. Oh, awesome! We have a psych major in the audience. I have much to learn from you. Let's connect outside. Awesome. So I'm definitely not going back to the presentation. I'm not focusing on the motivation part at all in terms of the motivation behind the attacks. We're just focusing on understanding how we can defend against them. So psychology is such a broad field. There's so many different areas of study. And this is just a few of them. This is not an exhaustive list at all. But the one thing that I'm focusing on is the cognitive psychology, which is the study of information processing and behavior. So when I first started studying psychology, this was what I was most interested in. So how we process information, how it influences how we may react. And for example, someone throwing a ball at your face, you react differently to that than if you are sitting down to solve a math problem. Those are very different processes. And I see an awesome comment from Amy saying Chris Hanege and his group has great info and resources. Yes, absolutely. Christopher Hanege's books are fantastic. Also, Kevin Mitnick's books are also fantastic. On those two authors were my inspiration back when I started studying cybersecurity, and they fantastic resources. I'll put their names up on the screen at the end of the session as well, in case anyone is interested in reading those. I actually have some of their books right next to me now. All right. So one of my favorite theories in cognitive psychology is the dual systems theory. It's such a neat and concise way of explaining the two different types of reactions. So ball hurtling at face versus sitting down to solve a math problem. It's also called a dual process account, if anyone's interested. So system one is essentially instinct. So you see a snake and you run. It's also very low effort and very quick. Whereas system two is more deliberate. It's like playing chess, right? You take the effort to determine your next move, and you're playing through the various scenarios in your head and the consequences of some various actions. So that is system two. So attackers, social engineers, want you to be reactionary, right? They want you to engage system one so that you can see their prompt and react. So you click the phishing link or give out your password, right? Or your access will be suspended forever. But what we as the potential victims want to be doing is engaging system two. So that critical, logical thinking, it's a lot more effort, right? A lot more effort. So of course we would, our preference would be to rely on system one because it's lower effort and easier to do. And it's largely automatic, and it's largely outside of conscious access or largely unconscious. And then system two is more it's high effort, it's slower, it takes time and effort. That's also where abstract thinking plays in. Awesome. We also have someone who majored in sociology. Cool. Very cool. Nice. So let's keep going. Even when we're trying our best to make good decisions, good thoughtful decisions, and engaging our system two thinking and trying to make those great next steps, right? We're going throughout our day. We have even more obstacles in our path. So, for example, here's just some of the challenges that we experience, right, in the thinking processes that can lead us to make wrong decisions. For example, multitasking. Right? It's easy to be suspicious of a link in an email if that's the entire thing that you're doing. That's the only task that you're focusing on in that moment. But if you're, for example, if you're working from home and you are working on an urgent report and then you're fielding questions from your coworker and then trying to pick up a phone call and then someone at home in the background is asking you questions at the same time, that is not as easy to, sit back, react to the email, think through it logically, and then react to it and analyze it and see it for the phishing email that it is, for example. It's not as easy. For other challenges are, for example, incomplete or incorrect knowledge. So it's a bit self-explanatory. If you don't have correct or complete information, you're more likely to arrive at a wrong conclusion. But what I'm going to dive into deeper now in the next slide is my personal favorite part. Heuristics and biases. So heuristics, they're basically the mental shortcuts that we take when that is based on our past experience. instead of using the facts of the present situation to make that decision, you're relying on your previous experience to react faster. So you'll just look at a few of these heuristics and biases on this slide here. So I've listed out some heuristics and or biases on this side of the screen. And then what I'll do is I'll talk through a bit of the story, a fictional scenario, of course, and we'll go through the heuristics and biases as the story goes through. So let's imagine that we work in accounts payable, right? We have this company that you work for happens to have an IT provider that is outsourced, third-party IT provider. So you go about your day, and then you get a phone call, right, from someone who is, so they introduce themselves as Joe. It's Joe from your IT provider. So your mind goes, a vendor. I'll now treat this person as it'll treat all people in the vendor category. So I'll treat them as a trusted party. And this is where the representativeness heuristic comes in. That's when you rely on categories. You categorize an individual or a thing or a situation into a bucket, and you treat that thing or person or situation as you would treat the rest of those in that category, right? So you're applying, you're categorizing that thing, and you're reacting to it as if you react to anything in that category. So this is a vendor calling you, and so you're reacting to it as if it's a trusted party, because all vendors in your mind are trusted parties. So we go along with the conversation. Joe's talking about how the current lockdown is affecting the business and how difficult it is working from home, trying to homeschool the kids. I'm talking from a Canadian perspective. This is a very common situation right now here. For you, lockdown and COVID, that's definitely top of mind. And at least here in Canada, let's pretend we're all in the same spot. And so we believe this statement, and you carry on the conversation with this trusted party. So Joe happens to be super friendly. And before I move on, the availability heuristic is when you put more weight on the information that is more readily available to you in your mind. So, for example, COVID and work from home, or have been in headlines for a long time. Those pieces of information are readily available to you. So you're more likely to bring more weight to this part of the conversation than to the rest, and to therefore it makes the entire conversation more plausible as well. So Joe's super friendly, right? He's openly sharing his daily concerns, and you're sympathizing with each other about the difficult situations you're both facing. So at this point, before continuing the conversation, what you should be asking yourself is, do I trust Joe? Do I trust this person? The problem with this, though, is that do I trust Joe is a very difficult conversation or question to ask yourself, and it requires a lot of system 2 processing. It's a lot of different nuances that go into that question and trying to answer it. So what the mind does instead, it swaps that question out for an easier question. So instead of saying, do I trust Joe, you think to yourself, do I like Joe? So instead of saying trust, you say like. So we know that Joe is super friendly, right? You're commiserating on this conversation. So the answer to that question is, yes, I like Joe. And therefore, I'd also trust Joe, because you just swapped that question out. So you continue trusting Joe and continue talking to him. So Joe shares with the recent chaos that he's completely forgotten to ask his team to update their payment information with your company. So this needs to be updated as soon as possible, and so that they don't miss the next payment. So in the statement, there's 2 pieces of information. So one is that the lockdown chaos has caused Joe to forget an important step, and that he's now in distress. So this is a plausible statement because we know that lockdown is going on right now in this scenario. And then there's the second piece of information is that he needs to update his payment information so that your company's payments goes through to him on time. So the confirmation bias part of this conversation is that you are looking out for the pieces of information that confirm your previous beliefs in that is more plausible. So you would put more emphasis on the fact that he's talking about the lockdown, that he's in distress, and you'd be ignoring the less plausible bit of the conversation, which is he needs to do this he needs to get this odd request, and he needs to change his payment information over the phone, which is just a strange request, really. So normally, let's say that you need to get manager sign-off, right, to do this over the phone. But the thing is that your team deals with this IT provider very often, and you maintain a great relationship. And because you're persevering in your belief, so belief, perseverance here. So because you're persevering in this belief that earlier in the conversation that Joe is a trusted party, you go ahead and you make the change, and noting kind of in the back of your mind to go check back with your manager after. And then Joe thanks you profusely, and then he hangs up. So say now that you forget to double check with the manager afterwards, completely slips your mind, and then several days later, a sizable amount is deposited in the wrong account because Joe was, in fact, an attacker, right, in this scenario, and the funds have been rerouted to his account as opposed to going into a different, into the proper vendor account. So that was a lot of information all at once. So what we'll go through it a little bit again, but at this point you might be wondering what we can do to permanently eliminate, right, these heuristics and biases. Never fall victim to them, and unfortunately we can't, right? This is how our minds work. We're all human. It's how we operate. But what we can do is to try and turn these heuristics around and make them work for us instead of against us. So we'll start with the first heuristic, representativeness. This is where you categorize Joe as a vendor who is a trusted party, and then you proceed to treat them as such. So how can we possibly combat this heuristic and actually make it for us instead of against us? One of the possible answers is ensuring that all these trusted categories have specific procedures and processes that are attached to them, that the teams are required to follow every time there's an interaction with this vendor. And then you can also build policies and procedures which will force the team to ask predetermined questions to everyone in the category to validate them. So instead of thinking, when Joe calls you, thinking vendor equals trusted party, therefore going to give them whatever they want, the representativeness heuristic will be associated with a procedure. So, for example, a vendor equals question this number A, or letter A. So these predetermined questions will also help with the rest of the heuristics that we mentioned here. So it will remove the load from the team's minds as well. So it will help ask those questions to avoid the question swapping heuristics, so that the person doesn't have to make up questions in their mind on the spot. That's taken care of for us. You can look out for unusual requests or information to avoid confirmation bias. You can continually and mindfully validate the information during the course of the interaction, and that will combat belief perseverance. And essentially, that could help turn things around. So if you, for example, in Canada, whenever you call in to the Canada Revenue Agency, they'll ask you a validating question. Similar thing, you would be implementing this at this fictional company. So some conclusions, and then I have one more slide after this. It really comes down to mindful policies and procedures and training, and being aware, right? So pausing before we act to engage that system too. And this does go for ourselves, it goes for our users, it goes for our external parties as well. And the reason that I mentioned that it goes for ourselves too is that we don't want to be subject to the not me fallacy. So essentially, that when the problem with being aware of all this content that I mentioned before is that, and being aware of all these heuristics and biases that we learn about them and we think, yes, of course, silly humans will fall for these, right? But these biases don't apply to me because I've learned all about these heuristics and biases. I know better. I would never fall for this, which is, of course, not true. Whether we are well-versed in psychology concepts and principles or not, we're still human and we're still susceptible to all these things. So as you consider these principles and you build your procedures and training people, be wary of the not me fallacy. Definitely include yourself. Don't make yourself the exception. Include yourself in all those procedures, policies, and training as well. And with that, I am working on some research and on the intersection of cybersecurity and psychology fields. So if you're interested in continuing this conversation, or if you just want to chat, or want to be involved in some of my projects, definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn. Please mention the session though, so that I know where I met you before, and you can also follow me on Twitter. So with that, I'm going to look to the chat if there are any questions. I'll put the references up in the slide as promised. So if you'd like to take a look at those at your leisure, you're welcome to do so. And with that, I thank you all very much for listening. And I'll now pause for any questions you may have. Ooh, I see a question. What are some good ways to explain these risks to employees and other folks who might become victims of social engineering attacks? So I found that storytelling and having examples and real stories, cases from the past, really help drive that message home. And because we don't dealing with or learning things in theory is very difficult. So making sure it's easy to visualize this information is very important. So that's one of the things that I've done. So before, I used to work at a smaller company, which did not have a lot of, I guess, understanding or knowledge about cybersecurity, and I had the pleasure of building up their security foundation. So storytelling, definitely. Oh, thanks, Sandy, and thanks, Julian, as well. It definitely does help. There's a lot of great resources. I know the Canadian ones. I know that there's a lot of resources out there as well in the US and across the world. So SANS, CSANS, I'm just going to start typing. SANS has some great resources, very specific resources on working from home as well. SANS is great. NIST is great. NIST are the technology, standards and technology, the US. So Canadian Cyber Center. Yeah, there's so many free, amazing resources and examples, and even companies like I think I saw some examples and free resources with FishMe and some other companies. They just have posters and stories and examples and concepts right on their website. So definitely a lot of great open source examples out there. I see another question. Thanks, Anisha. Apart from phone conversations, what are some other areas of risk of social engineering? So many different ways. All right, so we can talk about phishing, which is voice phishing, which is the one in the phone calls. Then you have phishing with a PH, which is through email. So someone sends you an email and says, "Oh no, like your access will be suspended. Click this link," and then it downloads viruses on your computer and whatnot, or asks you for more information. Then you input your banking details and whatnot. Oh, sorry. And then there's in person. There are some individuals who opt to go and try to physically gain access to offices. So they try to tailgate and they pretend to be part of the company. They do some research about the company. They talk the talk, and they just rely on emotions and saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Can you please let me in? I'm so late to my meeting. I lost my key on the way here." And they leverage social engineering that way, and they get in to a physical location. Oh, there's so many. Very, very interesting stuff. So some books. This is I'm not endorsed, by the way, by these authors. I'm just a big fan of them. So these books I bought myself. Okay, there's Fishing Dark Waters. There's another book that I see in the chat. Well Aware, Master the 9 Cybersecurity Habits to Protect Your Future by George Finney. Nice. I haven't read that one, but I'll take a look as well. Thanks, Denise. What else? No, there's so many great resources out there. Even if you just Google social engineering, you'll see so many. And go on YouTube, there's a bunch of demonstrations as well that people have done at conferences where they film someone going on the phone and getting access to someone's telephone account, changing that, like all being an attacker, and doing all sorts of scary things with people's personal information, and getting more, like knowing how to extract more information from the person that you're talking to on the phone, all sorts of things. They're very, very skilled. And I know that I had a conversation at another forum about what skills these social engineers have, because you can also have ethical social engineers, right? Because ethical hacking is a thing as well. So offensive security is a legitimate field. That kind of relationship building skills, communication skills, interpersonal skills, being able to make friends really well, and getting that information, leaning on people's empathy. So many amazing things. I mentioned Kevin Mitnick on this slide too, because he is one of the world's most famous hackers and social engineers. Anyway, he has a bunch of books, and he also goes through the things that he's done as not always as a good hacker. Like he's been an attacker as well. Anyway, there's so many cool books and resources, and I'm definitely going to keep poking at researching more about the different types, areas in psychology that are applicable in cybersecurity as well. So I'll keep doing this kind of stuff and bringing more concepts to light, making it more, I guess, well known, because we don't really talk about psychology at all in this field very often. I don't see any more questions, but I will hang around for a while. And also, thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate all the comments as well. It's really nice getting to know all of you. Please do connect. I'd love to connect with all of you. Thank you very much, everyone. All right, I will sign off. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of the conference, and hopefully I'll see you on social media.